All right, welcome everyone. If you can find some nibbles. And I know that we have a bit of a childcare dilemma today. We do, and I apologize for that. These are the unexpected byproducts of having this on a fourth Sunday, which is not when it was scheduled to be, but it's when it is because we had to cancel earlier this month with the snow. So this is how we roll. Children are welcome to be in the nursery at this time. They're also welcome to be in this room. And that's, again, how we roll, so that's okay. Yeah, we've got, and if anybody needs to get up and do something or feed their children something, and I did just want to say that if you want to attend the feast, I asked Nate, and it will remain open till 11:30, so you can, if you came to the 9 o'clock, you can still go at the end of our class. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. We're a small crew today, but we'll probably garner a few more people. And there are handouts here. It's funny, Ernest is away. He's probably landed by now in Malta. He left last night. But I was really annoyed with him for leaving for this one. This is the one, probably the topic that I struggled with the most. And I think it's because probably in some ways it means the most to me. And it's probably the area in which I have changed the most as a parent from where I started when my oldest two were young, were tiny. And there are reasons why it has changed. So I invite your engagement with it. And really it's kind of, I mean, I've titled this section, Shaping Your Child's Soul. We began with, just to do a little overview, we began with talking about us as spiritual beings and are tending to our own spirituality and our own relationship with God in order to become the sort of people who can parent spiritually. In our second week, we talked about the spiritual nature of our children, that they are already also spiritual beings as people created in the image of God, and learning to identify and respond to some of their already spiritual nature. Anna, can you just close that door? And work with what already is, rather than assuming it's not there. Last week we talked about informing the content of our children's faith. And again, recognizing the fact that children don't struggle to have faith. We do, adults do. But a lot of our work as the adult in the relationship is to give shape to it, to inform that faith. And we talked about even age-appropriate, contextualized forms of the gospel as our children unfold into adulthood. Today, what I really want to get into is the idea of training. And this actually touches on the area of discipline, which is why this is a little bit delicate. And yet it is very Christian. This isn't just for the realm of parenting gurus and psychologists. There's actually Scripture, and our being followers of Christ has something to inform our approach to training our children. And so I want to talk about this, recognizing that there are multiple theories and approaches to this, and it can get into dicey waters on how we go about training. There have been abuses, and there has also been neglect of training. Like, those are the two extremes of the spectrum. People who have taken authoritarian discipline to a level that it's something that we kind of go, ooh, well, that's not loving, and that doesn't honor the dignity of the child. And on the other extreme, kind of going, well, they're their own person, they're going to figure it out themselves, which isn't really taking a very proactive Christian stance either. So we're going to try to navigate between those two extremes and find a way forward. And I think maybe to start with, the question is, and for you to discuss with each other, if you were to mentally picture the kind of person that you long for your child to become, and I say the kind of person, obviously, at least I hope in our context, we're not predetermining what career our children will end up in. Having lived for 15 years in South Asia, that's not outside the realm of, I've told my children, doctor, lawyer, engineer, one of each. That was a joke. But what kind of person do you dream of your child becoming? I think if we don't have a vision for our children, then we've lost before we've started. There's a sense in which it is good and right to dream of the kind of person your child will become, because if we don't have that vision in front of us, then what is informing the way we engage shaping them into that kind of person? So here's just some questions to get you going with it. What is that person like? How would you describe the kind of person you hope your child will be by the time they are an adult? What do you hope will matter most to them? What will be the orienting values, the deepest values that they hold that orient how they make their decisions and how they live? And finally, what would it be like to be that person's neighbor, colleague, spouse, or child? It may be hard to see your 2-year-old and think of them having a neighbor, a colleague, a spouse, or a child, but actually that's what we're preparing them for. We're preparing them to be adults in the world. So what do you dream of, if you could just dream, okay? And then I'm just going to give you a chance to think about that right now. And there's a second question, and then we'll turn in groups and kind of talk about this. The second question is, what are ways you're already training your child to become this? What are you already doing, whether or not you meant to or not, to help them, to train them, to shape them into that kind of person? All right? I know, it's kind of big, isn't it? Do y'all want a minute? I'm just going to give you a minute just to think about these 2 big questions, and then we'll take some time to talk about it. It's hard when they're under 1, because at this point you're just trying to keep them alive. But actually it's important to start end visioning, because if you don't end vision, then you're not going to be aiming in that direction.
I can speak. I mean,
Yeah.
I think a lot of what I'm working on is kindness, like acknowledging that other people
Exist, have feelings,
have feelings,
have agency.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's so stark how you recognize like the innate selfishness of people when you're confronted with it, and even a very young child who was not interested in that toy until his brother had it, and then he wanted it. And like you just see these dark tendencies, and trying to train out of selfishness and towards kindness is like underneath, I feel like, most of my interactions with them.
Just to be aware that others exist, have feelings, that you are not the center of the universe. Yeah, we're not trying to raise Hitler. Yeah, but you know what? They would all very, very happily.
But you can see that potential.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Megan. Yeah.
Well, so I guess children see often 2 very different parents, and there are many ways in which I hope our daughter is more like. There are probably a few ways in which it would be better if she were like me.
I love the honesty.
But she of course sees those conflicts, and
Yeah.
I don't know how to resolve them. I don't know how to explain to her, you really should be more like mommy here.
In this area,
Maybe
but not in that
this
area.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't really know how one does this, because you model. It's hard to model it when there are 2 models, especially when in any given moment one is arguably better than the other.
But it's great that your child sees that there are options.
Yeah.
There's variation, and you can always compliment through those.
I have a story for you.
True, but of course, some of the things are, look, so in any couple, one couple is going to be quicker to anger. So, that's not good, right? That's just kind of the way it is. So it's nice to compliment the one who isn't quick to anger, but the child will see the one who gets.
So an example of this.
More quickly or
Yeah.
whatever.
I had one, my eldest, who at one point, about 5 or 6 years old, Ernest was overseas. We happened to be in the US for a home assignment, and he was back in India. And this child was on he called, for a check-in, and this child said, "Papa, Mama's making me eat the crusts." You know, this is the play them off each other. And he said, oh, that sounds very hard. And do you know what I mean? I don't even remember what it was, but you know, and this was classic, the compassionate parent, and then the strict, you're okay, you can handle this parent. And we got off the phone and I had a chat with that child. And I said, you have two different parents who have two different orientations. And this is a gift to you because you need to learn in life both that things don't always go your way and sometimes there are things you don't like and you have to do them anyways, and that's what I'm good at teaching you. And you also get to learn in life that God is both holds standards for us and that God is also gracious and compassionate and merciful. And so that's what you're getting from Papa. And so even like just naming it to the child, that these are both virtues, that these are both things that you need to learn, and isn't it a gift that you get both of us? If you had just one and not the other, now wouldn't that be sad? And I think at that point the child's thinking, I could do without you. But just, you know, naming it. There's nothing wrong with having these conversations with our children. Yeah.
My picture of my child changed so much when I saw the word neighbor, because that really implanted this image in my mind of what she's going to be like as she's older. And so while I want her to be very empathetic throughout life and very strong, I want her to be that wonderful neighbor, colleague, spouse, child. The word that came up was change maker. Because I want her to really challenge what some beliefs might be given to her,
Yep.
but to make those changes that she sees fit.
Yep.
Empathy, love.
Yeah. So those are those two values may feel competing, but you know, how do we build the empathy, the kindness, and also the boundariedness of saying, no, I am me, and though everyone around me may think that this is a good way to be, I see it another way. And so while being empathetic and kind, I'm also going to hold my ground and actually seek within an appropriate way to bring change to the world around me. Those are, you know, we often are reacting to something. We're often training our children to be the better version of ourselves and failing to recognize that maybe there are things that are organic to us that aren't organic to them. And so there's an important piece of just recognizing that they're going to need both sides, and that they're not mini-me. They're a new creation. Wow, that's good. Thank you. All right, well, we could spend more time with this. There's actually, I put on the back of your worksheet, and this is something for you to take home and work on, and maybe even talk through with your spouse. What I want for my child. And this is like socially, spiritually, what virtues, what character traits, professionally, why not? I mean, you know, we think I want a child who's going to be able to work within a system, and who will also still be their own person within that system. So there's a lot of both and stuff that we have to think about. And then begin to think about what are some habits, practices, or rhythms that we can establish that foster this, that foster empathy. Megan, I'm going to go to you, and Kimberly, I'm going to ask you too, because y'all are both at a stage with children where you're addressing a bit more. What are some of the, like, just the habits and the rituals that build some of the things that you're, like, what are you already doing that are intentionally cultivating?
You go first, because I've had a really bad day with this so far today.
I feel like I see like a lot of struggle. Like my oldest daughter has struggled with like being an older little sister, and I try to just really explain to her, like, think about how would you feel if you were the little one and this was happening to you. And
Yeah.
I, like, tell her a story of like
Yeah.
try to like tell her a story so she can kind of practice like feeling other people's emotions.
Yeah.
It works.
Sometimes it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Yeah, that's great. Like even just the invitation and the telling of the story, both inviting them, like the how would you feel if, but then actually giving her the task of verbalizing that. That actually is quite a ritual that I imagine will stay with her when she's 35 and mad at her spouse. Do you know what I mean? Of what's it like? You know, we all still hear our mother's voice in our head, even when she's not talking. these little things, the ways that we redirect, the ways that we build in a little practice, actually are coaching them. We're like professional coaches, we just don't know it. These are the habits that are going to be ingrained in them when they are adults, just as we have habits that are ingrained in us. And so there's, the things that work for you, pass them on in a little bit of a ritual like that. Yeah. Megan, you have something for us yet?
I mean, I guess the most effective consequence we use when it's going wrong is removal of the toy or the object or whatever it is they're fighting over. Like, and with our kind of refrain with that is like, nothing is more important than treating each other with kindness. So if this thing is making that not happen,
Right.
it's gone.
Right.
So that gets us somewhere, but
Yep.
doesn't stop it.
No, it doesn't stop it.
Later about something
No,
else.
no. And that's the thing, is that training is gradual. And I think that that's like, and we're going to talk a little bit about, so I love that we've gotten an example of a positive, a proactive way, and a negative, a consequence. And I think we hold both of those. And parenting that neglects either is kind of missing something. But training is very much it's engaging a process that isn't gonna, like, there's no magic pill, there's no magic formula, but it's something we continue to engage in. And like with coaching for any sort of sport, the more you engage it, the more capacity is built, and you can then build on that. So don't quit just because it doesn't work the first time. You stay with it, and it's a matter of shaping, the way a potter shapes, by putting a little pressure here, relieving a little pressure there, and it changes over ages and stages as well, which we'll talk about ages and stages next week. I had one that I remember. One of the gifts of having multiple children, not that everyone ends up with multiple children, but one of the gifts is that in a way you get to coach them between each other interpersonally. And if you don't have multiple, then it's a good reason to have friends over, like their peers over, and get to then do that coaching. But I remember with our oldest two, they're 23 months apart. And I remember looking up and realizing I'm doing marriage counseling right now. And it's not really marriage, but it's just how to communicate in relationships. And I remember when they were, maybe 4 and 6 and having another spat. And I wanted them to share a room. I remember saying, even if I were rich enough for all of you to have your own room, I would still want you sharing a room at this point. Because there's something to learning how to share a space, share things, and work through the conflicts that come out of that's a lifelong skill. And if we can teach it to them while they're young, then that's actually going to work better for them when they're older. And I remember, coaching them through I statements. Instead of, you did this, saying, no, when you do this, I feel, and I would please like you to. And like just teaching them how to own to the idea of being boundaried but empathetic, how to represent themselves well but in an appropriate way that actually moves towards good communication and a good resolution, instead of whack or and so anyways, all of this is really, every problem is an opportunity for training. And if we can get that in our heads, because that's very frustrating as parents, the problems, when they're not just working the way we think they should, are often the times when it takes more of our time. It's very inconvenient, but it's actually the golden moment to shape them. You know that this problem is just a micro version of a problem that's going to happen in life. And so you're getting the opportunity to walk them through a good response to it and to practice that now, so that when they run into an amplified version of it at 20, 30, 40, 50, you've actually gotten to shape the ideas, the seeds of how to respond. So as frustrating as character development is in children, it's actually probably one of our greatest responsibilities and opportunities. I remember looking at a 4-year-old and thinking, this is my opportunity to help you not end up divorced, or with a heartbreak over a friendship that ends that didn't have to, because here is where I get to train you and how to work through conflicts and how to give and to take and to communicate and to forgive and all those sorts of things. So anyways, I'm perseverating, but I'm sorry, I think that this is where the rubber really meets the road in so much of parenting. Okay. So here's another question. Here we've talked about what kind of people we long for our children to become. What kind of people does God long for his children to become? If we begin to recognize that our children are actually, first and foremost, God's children that he's entrusted to us to steward. And there's so much in Scripture. I mean, the simplest way to boil it down would be love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. And we quote those things all the time on this, hang all the law and the prophets. But actually, loving God and loving neighbor, while kind of overarching principles, they do have a lot of very practical applications. And I think this, as parents, we're the ones who are getting to break it down into practical application. I love what Paul does in Ephesians. This is just one passage, but I think it's a helpful one. And it's in your handout if you can't see it there. But he says, you were taught, or we could say you were parented or trained with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self. So that selfish, narcissistic, the world should go the way I want it at all times self. We are helping our children. We're calling to them to put that way of being off, which we all inherit quite naturally, and to put on a new self, which is created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Well, what does that look like? Well, I like that Paul breaks it down for us. This isn't comprehensive, but it gets us thinking. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood. So there's so don't lie. And instead, here's the positive. Speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. This is actually a call to love. This is rooting our telling of the truth in the practice of loving. And I'm just trying to give examples here for what we're calling our children to. It's not just about virtue, it's about being loving people. And part of being a loving person is being a truth-speaking person. And so we practice that when they're little. A second one, in your anger, do not sin. This isn't saying that our children should never get angry. We all get angry, of course we do. But find a way to express it that is still loving. And then we work with our children through that. And we work with our children on letting go of anger. So, okay, you have it. What's an appropriate way to express it? And how do you then, having expressed it, move beyond it rather than holding on to it? Anyone who's been stealing or taking toys from other people must do so no longer. But instead, the change in mindset isn't just a don't do that. It's a call to use what you have for the good of others. So this is like, don't steal the toy, share it. And so we're really calling for a change not just of practice, but of mindset, from self-orientation to a healthy interaction and a mentality of using what I have for others, good, which is what it is to love. Do not let unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. So we're back to talk. This time it's not speech. It's not about lying. It's about being mean. Don't say things that are going to hurt other people. And instead, use your talk for what is helpful, for building others up according to their needs. So find a way to use your words to be encouraging. And again, we work with our children through this. They say something that's really mean, and you say, well, how do you feel to be on the receiving end of that? Maybe this person needs to be encouraged. How can you communicate the same thing in a way that would actually help them change or help them know how you feel rather than shut them down and make them feel attacked? Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling. Children never brawl. Slander. Slander is kind of the delighting in, of course they need to come and tell us things, but it's the delighting in representing their sibling or their friend badly, delighting in reporting something bad about them. How do we help transfer that into holding, I need to tell you this, but it makes me sad too. And malice, boy, we're all capable of that. And then the call is be kind, compassionate to one another, forgiving one another, just as in Christ, God forgave you. And the call is to recognize that we all need mercy, that our children need mercy, and we can point this out to them. You remember that time that you did this and I forgave you? Well, this is your opportunity to forgive your sibling, your friend, just as you sometimes need forgiveness. And so the call, and I love this, to our children and to us is to follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, not judged children, but loved children. And walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us. So this is sort of the vision. This is God's vision for us and for our children. And I think it's important just to have that enfleshed a little bit so that we have a goal in what is it we're seeking to shape our child to become like. Any thoughts on that before we go to the next sort of the how-to? It's good to have a vision. Questions on the vision before we go to the process? Okay. So it's a fascinating study. Any of you who enjoy studying scripture, I mean like bite-sized people. Years ago when mine were small, I started asking, how does God train his children? And I read the book of Exodus from the perspective of God being the father and Moses kind of being the mother, and there are all these kids. And sometimes they complained about the food, and sometimes they rebelled and said, we've had enough of this. And sometimes they said, thank you, that you're the best. And so there was like leadership, but also some training that goes in. And sometimes God sends them to bed with their stomachs empty. And sometimes he lets them get hurt. And like just this idea of like asking, how does God actually shape our souls if we're going to look to God as the ultimate parent? And how do we, in practical ways, shape the process, shape the souls of our children and how we interact with them? And I think the starting point is actually recognizing that God interacts with us. He communicates with us. And I love this promise in Psalm 32. This is God speaking first person. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. So God gets involved in teaching, and obviously the implication is for us to imitate him in that. And then I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. So this isn't angry. It's not like, I told you. Of course, you're going to say that sometimes. But it's more of a being involved, not just at the beginning in giving an instruction of this is how we're supposed to be, but then actually tracking with us. And when we begin to get off course, gently course correcting. So it's a much more engaged, process-oriented shaping that God says he does with us. And I think it is the model for how we do this with our children. But there's something else. Hebrews 12, which is a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, but I think it's an important one. And it says this, and have you completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son? It says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you. Because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. I don't know if any of you are ever a little bit afraid of chastening or rebuking your children, lest they feel unloved. Does that resonate with anybody?
Yelling in the morning, absolutely. How do we, that's the sort of thing where I could spend the entire day living in guilt because I've yelled. But
Yeah.
it took so much time to realize I'm not the only mom who yells. And then eventually I started to learn there are some ways that we can work through schedules the night before so that we don't have to yell in the morning. But yes, I hate.
Yes.
Sometimes I dislike that.
Yeah.
Just
Yes.
so much in the yelling.
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa. It's good for us. I think we associate discipline and rebuke with anger. And I think, anger, that's something we've got to work on. That's back to the first session on our own ongoing spiritual formation and recognizing, yes, we're going to, and yes, we get to apologize to our children and to God and go again. But the rebuking, the need for correction, the need for saying, no, actually, that's not okay, it's loving. In the moment, not when they're tiny, but they get a little older and they say, I don't like you, or you don't love me because you correct me. And it can actually make you start kind of second guessing a little bit. But the fact is, if we didn't love, we wouldn't correct. And we understand that part of loving is correcting. Part of loving is not only correcting, but actually disciplining. Disciplining means something unpleasant, allowing or even imposing an unpleasant consequence, because what we don't want is a bigger natural consequence. And so we are actually, out of love, imposing a small consequence that's appropriate, and we'll talk about that. Because example, a child is about to run into a street, and we say, stop. Now, we need to train our children to obey our commands, because if we haven't trained them and we say stop and they laugh and keep going, there's a big consequence that can come from that. And so where do we train them to listen to our commands? In the smaller things, in the moments where their life isn't on the line. It can feel a little bit like authoritarian and, like, who made you God over me to say that I have to do what you say. But we're holding on to a bigger picture, and we recognize in life, if you don't learn how to do what you're told in an appropriate situation, you're not going to be able to hold down a job. You're not going to stay out of jail. Do you know what I mean? So we recognize as parents, we do have authority, and it's our job to train our children to respond appropriately to authority. Now, there are ways of wielding that are dictator-like and unloving, and we reject those ways. And yet, it is important to introduce our children to the idea of obeying authority. This is dicey waters, because the way I was raised is very different from the way I've ended up in relationship to authority. But I do think it's important to just acknowledge that this is part of parenting, and it has to be part of parenting if we're going to be able to do our job well. The second half of this verse goes on to say, endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father or mother? If you're not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, either lovingly when they're young or in very big, harsh ways when they're older, then you're not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we've all had human parents who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. We learned respect because they gave an instruction and they held to it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, and we're all trying to figure this one out. But God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. And here's the point about discipline. It never seems pleasant at the time. Discipline involves something unpleasant, perhaps even something painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who've been trained by it. And so this is, I feel like, one of the heaviest responsibilities as parents, is to figure out how to discipline in a way that is beneficial to our children. Discipline done in a wrong way, discipline done in a harsh way, in a way that's reactive, that's our own anger, our own stuff spilling out, can actually really harm a child. We call that abuse. But a failure to discipline is neglect. And so it's walking this really fine line. And I feel like there's so many principles embedded in this, that it's for the good of the individual, that it's appropriate, that it's temporary, it's for a little while, that it's done within a trusting relationship where the child has reason to trust us because we have demonstrated that what we're after is not our own convenience or our own self-expression, but actually a very measured response to what is best for them. And when they protest, which they will, we can point back to that, and we build a track record of trust in which discipline can happen. I don't think discipline can happen when there's not trust. Discipline without trust will be experienced as abuse. It'll be, why are you being mean to me? Rather than, even though I'm saying that, I know this is actually for my good. Any questions on that? We're going to kind of try to take it home a little bit about what does it look like. Yeah.
I'm glad you acknowledged the age at which your mean
Oh, yeah.
You know, because like my kids definitely lose heart when I rebuke them.
Yeah, they do.
And, like it's actually been surprising to me how quickly they go from my rebuke to like questioning my love.
Yep.
Like I feel like I demonstrate that for them in a lot of ways, but it
Yep.
just basically takes one consequence apparently to like demolish that in their
Yep.
opinion.
Yep.
So it's like it's really hard to strike that balance.
It
that you
is.
describe. I think they are very quick to feel unvalued and unloved
Yep.
when they found out that they've done something wrong.
Yeah.
And I was surprised by that because again, I feel like I communicate love to them all the time, but discipline is still really hard to take.
And different children have different temperaments. Some, the second you draw a line, and I had one like this, the line is an invitation to step over, just, you think you're going to make me? And then others are very sensitive and conscientious, and the fact that there is a line makes them feel like maybe I'm not good enough, and they go into this tailspin. And so it's a matter of kind of studying, knowing your child, each one. But the lines still need to be there. And the one who suddenly with a rebuke goes into a tailspin, I think we learn how to rebuke in a way that is gentle and affirming, but also still says what we need to say. And if we let their emotional tailspin and sensitivity stop us from correcting them, then we haven't done them a favor. It's more than a matter of talking through how do you handle recognizing that you have fallen short of something and face it and not then like self-loathe. Yeah.
I think you can use that sentence that was in the previous
Yeah. Slide.
slide. If you're, wait a second, it's my son, do not make light of my discipline
Mm-hmm.
instead of the Lord's discipline. And don't lose heart when I rebuke you because I only discipline you because I love you,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And just
Have the conversation.
turning it around using God's words.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why I love that we have this. And how many of us, when life goes badly, feel like, is God mad at me? And this is God's answer. And so maybe it gives us a chance to empathize with our children, when they're in trouble all the time. They go through a phase. And we can say, I'm not mad at you. I love you. This is hard, but we're going to work through it together.
I remember when my daughter was learning to drive and I had to have her call me every time she changed positions in the, like she went to one friend's house.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know where she was. And she sat me down and said, Mom, you're so strict and I do everything right and, I'm going to start doing things wrong since you don't trust me anymore. And I remember, and I said to her, you know what? This is the first time I've got a teenager who drives, and I'm learning just as you are.
Yep.
We have to
Work this out.
work it out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think she appreciated my saying that.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly appreciated her saying it.
Mm-hmm. And what you're calling us to is not being impassive, but actually being human as we work with our little humans. Yeah. Yeah. Did you have something?
We have two kids that are very much one that line will shrink and
Yeah.
and the other one that stomps all over a line.
Yeah.
I think we've learned with the one that kind of shrinks when we discipline him, if we remind him, hey, we still love you,
Yeah.
and we talk about our job as parents.
Yeah.
So we say, what are 3 things we're supposed to do as parents?
Right.
Keep you safe,
Yeah.
love you,
Yeah.
and then we're like, and teach you right and wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like once after he calms down a bit,
Yeah.
then talk to him about that like later on, 30 minutes later.
Yeah.
He always comes back around.
Yeah.
And I said, I do it the other day, and I was like, what you were doing was really wrong.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I still love you for it.
Yeah.
So I think reminding the ones that, now the one that stomps all over the line, we're
Figuring that one out.
we,
Lord bless you.
he's 4, so he doesn't quite understand all this yet. But
Yeah. Yeah.
that'll be
A different conversation.
Yeah. But reminding him, hey, this is our job.
Yeah. Yeah. The one who stomps over the line, I feel like one of the gifts of that kind of child, and I eventually got around to saying it, affirming mine that is that way, and saying, God has gifted you with a very strong will, and that is a gift. In life, that's going to take you a long way. You know your mind, you have incredible capacity. What you're going to have to learn to do is to direct that will in the right way, and to rein it in and not just let it take you wherever it feels like going. And so to affirm the willfulness while calling them to put it where it needs to go, to put it towards good and doing the good rather than doing whatever the impulse leads to, or just, the independence. So a few things, just scriptures, but the question of how do we actually go about handling this training? You're all familiar with Proverbs 22 that talks about the importance of training up a child so that they will continue in that way. And in Ephesians, I really appreciate, and I think this applies to fathers and mothers, don't exasperate your children. This is actually quite a call to us to be proactive. The second half is instead bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So engage our job as parents, but to do it in a way that's not, another translation says provoke, that is not provoking them, that's holding space for their humanity, for their individuality, and that's working with it rather than antagonistically towards it or in a domineering way. And so these are just a few principles that I'm going to leave you with. What does it look like to train our children into godliness? This first, and we've kind of talked about this a lot as we've gone, first is model the process in our own living. And when we fall short of it, to name it. Yes, I needed to correct you for that. You needed the correction, but the tone of my voice, I was shouting, I was out of control, and I'm sorry for that. What I said is still true. And so to model our own process, to talk about, look, I'm still figuring out what to do with a teenage driver. So we model the fact that we are in process and we are engaging our own process of spiritual formation, even as we lead them in their process. And ultimately, that whatever our responses are to them should be based on what's best for them, not what's best for us, which is very purgative. This is Lent. This is when we get to give up our own self-interest and grow into doing what we do out of the best for our children. A second is to communicate not just the what of a behavior, like I told you to tell the truth, or I told you to share, or whatever, but actually to communicate with our children the why. Why is this behavior important? Which I love that the Ephesians 5 passage did that for us. It was like the why we shouldn't steal is that we should instead use our hands to serve and to give and to protect what belongs to others rather than to take it for ourselves. So when we say, don't take your brother's toy, that's fine, but let's have conversations around why not. Well, because that's not loving. And what we're doing is we're actually laying the foundation for our children not to become thieves and instead to become contributing citizens who get a job and have enough to share with others. This is what we're actually training at that point. Cultivate habits through reinforced practice. And the thing is, we have these big virtues that we want our children to become: kind, loving, gracious, compassionate, fine. But where does that really learn? It's in the granular habits. And this is why, actually, I think that teaching our children to say please, thank you, I'm sorry, and I forgive you are critical. And if we're not doing that, we're really, really missing a step in our parenting. Because when we teach our child to say please, we're teaching them to acknowledge the dignity of the other when they make a request. Not just, can I have more milk? It's, please, may I have some more milk? And it turns it from a demand into a humble request. And it honors the dignity of the person. So we might kind of think of these as just cultural niceties, but actually there's some character shaping that's going on in this language. Thank you is acknowledging gratitude. Someone does something for you, and we say to our child, say thank you. We're teaching them to pause and acknowledge when someone has done something and to respond with the humility of gratitude. And again, this is honoring the dignity of the other person. Comes out of love. Whether I've done something intentionally or unintentionally, if your child bumps somebody accidentally, to say sorry or excuse me. This is a way of, again, acknowledging the dignity of the other and owning my own mistake, which is We don't want narcissists. We want people who can own their own mistake and acknowledge it to the other. And I forgive you. I release you from the mistake or from the harm you've brought against me. So coaching our children through using this language isn't just about social nicety. It is actually cultivating habits that will shape their way of being. Requiring that they help with something, even if they make a bigger mess by helping. That calls them into noticing what's going on around them and not just doing what concerns them, but actually serving. This is calling them to love, to share, to clean up after themselves, because that's, again, being considerate of what I cause in the world, to follow instructions, which is another word for obeying us. When we require them to follow our instructions in a small situation in the home, we're preparing them for that scenario when they're about to run into the street. And we're preparing them for that boss that they're going to be really annoyed by, but still have to do what he said so that they have the job. This is coaching them in life. It's not just being on an ego trip. So we correct the bad, we rebuke, and we just as quickly, if not more so, celebrate the good. And I will say, there were times when a particular child seemed like all my interaction was correction. And those are rough days. You reach the end of the day and you hear the sound of your own voice and it's all correction. And that doesn't feel good. And you know, if it doesn't feel good to me, we don't want to provoke. We don't want to cause our children to lose heart. For those children and in those seasons, I would start making it a point to look for anything I could find to affirm. Just start looking for anything that I can notice them do. Hey, I asked you to do this and you're doing it. Look at that. Well done. Now, I know that like in 30 more seconds they're not going to be doing it, but before they get there, let's catch what we can and praise it. And this is, that encouragement goes a really long way. Communicate and follow through on appropriate consequences. And this is where we get into discipline. We get into the training of like thinking through. And I find that was really helpful to think through and talk through as a couple together in advance of the scenarios that we knew we ran into a lot, so that in the moment we were ready with an appropriate consequence. And when I say appropriate, it needs to be appropriate to the situation. And appropriate, really, it's calculated, it's selected, it's curated for training in the particular issue at hand. So it should be relevant and it should be right-sized to the offense. And just two principles about discipline. It's about training, not retribution. It's discipline, not punishment. I don't like the word punishment. You did this and this is your punishment for that. That makes it sound like I'm the police and you broke a law and there needs to be some punishment to legally satisfy the breaking of that law. That's antagonistic. It's not really for the person's transformation. It's about instilling enough fear that there will be a consequence so they won't do it again. Okay, that's okay. But I think better than that is thinking in terms of what unpleasant experience will actually shape them. So the refusal to clean up my toys this night may bring on the opportunity to not only clean up my toys, but to help Daddy clean up his thing. Or I had a child who might be in this room who was in a habit of complaining about being bored for a while. And we were like on a beach holiday, and this child is complaining about being bored. And I said, you know what? I have something for you to do since you're so bored. You see the trash, the litter on this beach? For the next 30 minutes, you are going to pick up the litter off of this beach. Then you won't be bored anymore. And you know what? Actually, that was one of my better parenting moments. I know. And the child was so upset, like, oh. And I realized, okay, I need to get up and do this also. So I got up, and the two of us spent half an hour picking up litter off the beach. I never got another complaint about being bored. That was a really good, it was a way of turning a bad thing into a good thing. And then the second part of this is leadership, not dominance. We are leading our children in disciplining them. We are taking the lead, and that is our job. But we're not dominating and suppressing. They are people. They have their personhood, their individuality, and we want to work with that and protect and protect the dignity of the child, even while leading them. And into that end, we engage them in the process. So we respect their personhood while redirecting their behavior. We hold space for appropriate forms of objection. Of course they're going to say, I don't like this, or why do I have to? And actually, I think part of our training is to teach them how to ask those questions, how to object in a respectful and appropriate way. So it's not because I told you to, nor is it this is up for negotiation. It's a teaching them how to object in a right way. And then finally, invite their expression of and alignment with their own deeper desires. What is it that you most want to be in this situation, and how can I help you get there? All right, that was a lot. Were there questions? If not, I'm going to give you something to work with, a case study. All right, why don't we do this? We'll take the two sides of the room, or maybe break up into 3 groups or so. But identify a common scenario which presents an opportunity for growth in your child, whether it's an I'm bored, or I don't want to clean up, or I don't want to go to bed, or you can't make me, or not sharing, whatever. Choose a scenario that is something you run into. And here are just some questions for you to think about in advance around that scenario. And some of the a little bit more experienced parents this may be good for you to use your own life right now for those who are still growing into this. What might you communicate with your child about that behavior? What might you talk about ahead of time that would help them begin to have a vision for loving? What positive practice might you introduce to help them develop into that behavior, if that would be appropriate? And here's the negative. What might be an appropriate consequence for this behavior? And finally, how might you engage them in the process of their own change? How might you cast a vision for them that makes them recognize what the goal is and work with it? Sorry, y'all are doing a great job, by the way. All right? Y'all want to try that in maybe 3 groups, 2-3 groups?